Hello there, and welcome back to War Thunder. Today you will see the tank review on the Leopard A1A1 L44, and this German premium medium tank of rank 5 with a battle rating of 9.0 is actually pretty good. There is nothing wrong with the tank, but to say it in a nutshell, I cannot recommend this tank in the current state, how it actually effectively plays out on the battlefield, and I don't think that it's this particular tank fault by itself. As I said, nothing wrong with this tank. I think when I first have to clarify the term tank review here. So I now have a better understanding how this tank plays, how it plays out, what it has to face in the current situation or state of War Thunder, and the matchmaker had a bit of time to settle down, to actually calm down a little bit, and I played now against this tank throughout the nations, and played the other tanks around this battle rating. So now I not just have a greater understanding of the meta of the tank, but also what it faces, how to deal with all the various different situations, how to use this tank properly, how to fight against it. And this is supported by the tank Excel spreadsheets that I will just show with all the statistics and to put them into perspective. So it's not a first impressions where you just play a few battles and just say it feels a bit like this or that. I actually did a few tests with them. I played more battles in it, and so I think that's the introduction of the tank review of the Leopard A1A1. Now let's go right into it. First of all, we obviously look at the armor, and the Leopard A1A1 L44 is equipped with a 120mm Rheinmetall L44 based on practically the chassis and the turret that is slightly modified of the normal Leopard A1A1 at the same battle rating. So there is no spaced armor, there is no composite armor, there is just a little bit of add-on armor, but you can actually ignore it. Everything and every tank that fires at you has ATGMs or Heat FS or APFSDS or an autoloader stabilizer, so it's relatively easy to hit this tank and to penetrate its armor. The hull here and the side armor is thin, a bit angled, but that's about it. We have here the side skirts that might stop hash, and some add-on armor on the sides of the turret, again very thin, and we have here some overlaid armor, but effectively it's not really worth talking about. This tank might absorb some freak shots, but that's about it. So maybe here where you have the cast homogeneous armor layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, yeah, maybe you get a very lucky ricochet or somebody hits your heavily angled side of the turret. But if somebody just shoots right next to the gun or just simply here, it's an absolute death shot. Why? Well, this has to do with the interior. First of all, you can see 41 shots in total. Those are big ammo racks. They are very prominent, and you either shoot at this side and hit the ammunition and the loader, and go further in the back into the powertrain, with the engine and the radiator and transmission, or you just hit the 3 people in a row with the driver, gunner, and also the commander, and have a crew knockout. And I think especially this ready rack here with the 11-12 rounds that you then have available with the rather quick reload, it's always full, so you just shoot right in the front half of the turret from the side, and you hit this ammo rack and blow the tank up. So just a hit at the turret ring just under the gun breech, you do massive damage with any sort of ammunition, and that's a bit of a problem. So the armor is not the tank's strength, and it's also not the internal survivability. There are parts where APFSDS might go through and do little damage, but those are rather the exception. So yeah, there is this, and I think now let's have a look at some statistics. Now let's begin with the mobility of the tank, and this shows the first sign of being very average, despite being not slow by any means, with 830 horsepower and 43 tons of weight, you have a horsepower to ton ratio of 19.3, so just under 20, and that is comparable to the A1A1, and it's certainly not bad, especially if you compare it to the Chieftain and the Soviet tanks and also the Brenners. However, it is significantly less than the XM1 and XM803, and you will face especially the XM1 on such on a regular basis. And you can see that you are also not the best in comparison in terms of top speed, actual top speed on the battlefield, and also reverse speed, and also the maneuvering in terms of, you know, acceleration, turning the tank, and so forth. You are not as good as the XM1, and as you could see, you don't have any armor to make up for it. And so this is the first sign that this tank is not as good as it might look at first glance. Now we come to the point where the L44 variant of the Leopard A1A1 actually differs from the A1A1, and this is that it is equipped with a very good 120mm smoothbore Rheinmetall L44 cannon with 41 rounds. And this is in terms of caliber on the higher end, although not the biggest, but I think that caliber doesn't really matter all that much anymore at those higher battle ratings. It matters more the gun handling and the reload, and with the reload you're surprisingly good. You are in the golden age of 6.7 reload, and this is the same as the Leopard, the TAM, the XM1, and many other tanks such as the Type 74 and the MX-30 BG Brenners. All other tanks actually have a higher reload, so this is an actual plus point. And the turret rotation speed is then again average with 24 degrees per second, and this is again significantly less than the XM1 and the XM803, but you are also again much better off than the Soviets. And the same goes with the gun depression. 9 degrees is certainly nothing to be coughed at, but again you're outperformed by the XM1 and the XM803, but you're again much better than the Soviets, and the gun elevation, well, then there it's best. The elevation speed of the gun, however, is again 4.5, and that is at the bottom end of the spectrum. And again, tanks such as the TAM, the XM1 and the XM803 are significantly better with, well, so much more, over 5 times faster. And that also brings us to the question of the stabilizer. And the stabilizer actually quits work, or quits working properly, at 25 kilometers an hour. So even if you reach the speed of an XM1, when you both meet on the battlefield and you have the equal chance, or you get the equal opportunity of firing at each other at the same point, you actually have to break down to actually get the gun properly on target, whereas the XM1 just points and clicks. And so you have a less good stabilizer as the XM1. So we see here a pattern. You are less mobile, you have less survivability, your gun handling is not as good as the XM1. And this brings us actually to the point. You are constantly in up tiers. You're constantly fighting the Americans. You're constantly not just having to deal with the XM1, but also the Abrams and the all the Abrams variants. And so this is a real struggle, because you have no advantage over them, and in every single category they are as good or even better than you. Now let's talk about the ammunition. So unlike the T55AM, we just have 2 ammunition types to choose from, and the first one is the DM12 Heat FS, and this is a very strong Heat FS shell. 650mm of penetration is very good. Mass velocity also kind of okay, with 1140 meters per second, so it's decent to aim. Obviously not as good as a Heat FS, which will come as an AP FSTS, sorry for this, as we'll see just in a moment. But again, Heat FS has numerous disadvantages. You cannot reliably shoot through bushes, trees, or any sort of wooden obstacle or anything that just is between you and your target, as well as against ERA it performs very poorly, and again against composite armor it doesn't deal all that good, except for the Soviets, but again with the exception of if they have the ERA package on. But if it hits, it actually deals a lot of damage, and it also initiates hull break, which is why you should keep a certain amount of rounds within your tank to deal with the SBA or to just have a cheaper shot, because the DM13 AP FSDS costs 900 silver lines per shot, and it's also a very good AP FSDS. 417 millimeters of raw penetration is certainly nothing to cough at. But again, it doesn't really deal all that well with the Soviet composite armor, but it can penetrate. Again, it's best used to just shoot under the gun barrel. However, the muzzle velocity of 1650 meters per second is really not bad, and it's easy to aim. Together with the scope, it is really great. Also, the follow-up shot with the 6.7 reload for an ace crew, of course, is again nothing bad. And while this shell is good, I think the AP FSDS on the L7 gun is equally good, especially against angled armor. It performs just a touch better, which is all the more important as you don't see all that thick flat armor except for the composite parts, especially against the Abrams. You cannot penetrate there anyway, again with the exception of the area around the gun barrel. Now let's have a look at how actually the tank stands up to its competition at this battle rating, not directly looking at top tier. We can see it has no APHE, it has no HE or hash. The APDS, or the APFSDS rather, is kind of okay, it's not bad. The muzzle velocity certainly the best in this comparison, but it even doesn't have the best penetration. This goes to the T62M1, but we have to look at the normalization, and there it's certainly not bad. Then we look at the heat, and it's just best in class. It actually even outperforms the ATGMs that can be found on the Russian tanks. And yeah, I think this just shows that the gun is average, the performance is average, and when you have overall just average stats and have nothing to back it up with any sort of special ammunition or special, mobility, and no armor whatsoever, you really run into problems if you then have to face an opponent that is just better in every single aspect at the same battle rating that you. And even in this ammunition comparison, despite the Rheinmetall being a good cannon, the raw penetration power is not comparable to the 540 millimeters of penetration on the JM33 on the Type 90 or the 3BM22 on the T80B, although it has better kind of normalization, but the raw penetration power doesn't reach to the 475 of the previously named tank. The shell is actually rather comparable to the M774 to be found on the Abrams and the Abrams IP, which of course we know stands for insane price. So the tank is average where it gets average. And yeah, let's have a look at some gameplay, how it actually plays out. So now let's talk about the final verdict of the tank and why I actually don't recommend it, despite nothing being absolutely wrong with the tank. Well, it's simply how it plays out currently. In so many cases, I'm not exaggerating, 80 to 90% of the battles that you'll play, you'll find yourself at top tier, and you find yourself in 80 to 90% of those cases fighting nothing but the Americans, and they just have currently too much going for them. The XM1, the normal M1 Abrams, the Abrams insane price, so the IP, then also the FJ4B with the guided rockets, and furthermore obviously the helicopters with up to 16 ATGMs. And if they went through all this, they just have so much more in terms of regular normal cast with bombs and rockets, be it jets, be it props, Sky Raider, Thunderbolts, you name it. They just have so much, and those teams are currently led by some of the best players out there to put the cherry on this imbalanced cake. And that is just creating a problem, because this is a tank designed to earn silver lines and to also give you the research points to go through the whole grinding process faster. This is why you pay for this tank the amount of money that you pay for it. Yes, you get a bit more premium time and silver and golden eagles as well, but I would say you're better off to actually not play at this battle rating at the moment, because it's absolutely way too much, too imbalanced, and at the end of the day, the absolute selling point of the game should be being fun. And I had no fun in this tank. Whatever you might think, it was not fun. It was not where I got any sort of satisfaction out of it. I don't think the tank is currently worth as a premium in the current state of the game. Now, the only times where he had good battles were against mostly the Soviets, and mostly when you had obviously a down tier, when you were top tier, but they were rather rare. And you see, you cannot pay for a tank where you have to count on getting a beneficial matchmaker with a beneficial opponent. This tank is not up to the task of facing Abrams that are actually aware where they're going, and it just doesn't compete in a fair fight if the Abrams get played by good players. Now, that is not always the case, but very often you see enemy teams ruffle stomping because they are there with their tanks, with 4-man squads, with fully goldened out crews and tanks, and that's just not fun. So the only advantage that you have actually on the battlefield compared to the normal regular one, the A1A1, is the reduced repair costs and the increased silver lines. But again, you have a 1.2 times 2.0 premium silver line modifier and not the 1.4 as the majority of high tier tanks have it, should have it. And if you compare it to the XM1, it also has the 1.4 times 2.0 premium silver line modifier. So the tank just feels nerfed and held back and just too sluggish in terms of mobility. The gun performance is okay to average, but certainly nothing special, and it really suffers in the current meta of both the battle rating and the opponents that you mostly will face on the battlefield. And you have to get lucky. You have to be very lucky and very good both at the same time. So you cannot count on this. By itself, again, the tank is not bad, and if it wouldn't be for 80 to 90% of the games being played against the Americans in a full up tier, I would give this tank a better verdict as it currently gets. Can you reduce the battle rating to 8.7? I'm against it. This place is already occupied by the less good T55AM. But again, the T55AM by itself is also better if in the current meta, because it just can shoot down, in theory, the helicopters with the ATGMs. It can one-shot an enemy tank from the side, very reliable due to the APCBC round, and it also has, to put a cherry on top of this, a lower battle rating. In a direct confrontation versus the Leopard A1A1 L44 that I'm currently driving, compared to the T55AM, I would give the better grade to obviously the Leopard A1A1 L44. It's just better in most respects. But on the other side of the spectrum, you obviously have the Abrams and the XM1 that currently get spammed out massively. And in this full picture, I just simply cannot recommend the tank. It's not worth it, it's not fun, it's not giving you the overall silver lines and RP that you need to efficiently and reliably grind through the German tech tree. And I think as good as the 9.0 German lineup is, overall, your opposition is better and just better suited for the most situations that you find in yourself. And you can see this is just a overall theme. This is an overall tendency throughout the games that I played. With the XM1 myself, with the T55AM, the TAM, the normal Leo, A1A1, and also the L44 variant. And this is just what I think has a bitter taste to it. Because again, nothing wrong with this tank. It's just not as good as the battle rating equivalents in other nations, and shows the problem of compression. And so if you think about it, do you expect this to get better in the future? Do you expect that this tank will be future proof throughout numerous patches to come? I doubt it, and I don't see a quick and easy solution to this overall problem, and this is again why I cannot recommend an actually good tank. Now if you have a different matchmaker, if you get a lot of down tiers, then let me know, because I certainly want to trade with you. Yes, I had fun in the few games where I faced the Soviets, and I think it was a rock paper scissors then, because you had to be careful of their helicopters, and you also had to actually aim for their weak spots, or where the armor is actually weak, so you can inflict actual damage on those tanks. And for side shots, this tank was really great. The heat shell and the APFSDS, they did their job. The gun is good, but when you have to compete against an XM1 that has a better stabilizer and equal rate of fire, you have no armor, you have less survivability, you have less mobility and less maneuverability, and you just have to face hordes of those tanks, and you misfire one shot, or you just misposition, or you just join in just a few seconds later because your PC needs a few more seconds to load. All those things just result in you being dead and you just hating the game. And this is not how I think a game, or a tank rather, should play out. So again, I cannot recommend this tank, as sad as it is. And you have to be lucky, you have to be a second line tank, you have to be a support tank, you have to camp. And when you are reducing a tank to the ability to camp, then why not play a challenger? Why not play something British, because they're actually having turret armor, and this is just not what this tank is designed for. It's designed for repositioning and mobility, but its competition is just so much better in every single aspect, in every single way. And this is where, again, the bitter tastes come from. Now, if you have a different opinion, if you have a different examples, please let me know. But whenever I had success, it was a combination of either a down tier facing the Soviets, or getting extremely lucky, or exceptional teamwork and exceptional situational awareness. And yeah, I don't buy a tank to grind when I have to rely on those things. So now let's have a look at the match. I actually wanted to commentate on this, but I think the verdict was a bit more important. You could see I was flanking, I was patient, I was moving with my team, I was constantly looking at the minimap. My team was doing very well, and I like this. Now we have gathered now 7 kills. And that's actually now effectively the end of the match. Now let's have a quick look at the post-battle results already. So, for having participated in the capturing of 1 zone and 7 kills, we actually got 68,000 silver lions and 11,400 research points. But there was a 10% RP booster, and also I got 7,500 from the Survivor Award. So you can see, despite having a very good battle, the income was not all that great, and you really cannot compete effectively for the capture zones, because mostly then CAS comes in, helicopters come in, you get actually surrounded and swarmed by Abrams or XM1s, and they just kill you, so you die in capture points. You cannot effectively expect more of them, despite them getting a lot of silver lines. Again, the modifier is 1.2 instead of 1.4, and this is another reason, on top of all the huge amount of reasons that I gave, to not go for this tank in the current status. And effectively it would be better, cheaper and more efficient to put a talisman on the regular Leopard A1A1 without the 120mm, and to ease the grind, to get even faster grinding procedure on the Leopard 2K. So currently this is not a bad tank, the package is not unfair, but currently fighting hordes over and over again of XM1s is not fun, it's not rewarding. Having said this, that's it finally for me today. So thanks for watching, thanks for listening. Please give this video a like if you did, subscribe if you want to see more, and also let me know your opinion in the comment section, and we'll see each other in the skies and on the battlefields of War Thunder.